Saudi Arabia has sentenced 49 Ethiopian migrants to death. These individuals crossed into Saudi Arabia from Yemen, a journey often taken by those fleeing poverty and hardship, hoping for a better life. But their journey was hijacked by drug smugglers operating at the border. These traffickers forced the migrants to carry illegal drugs into Saudi territory. Once they crossed the border, Saudi authorities arrested them all. Instead of being treated as victims of trafficking, every one of them was sentenced to death. According to reports, some of the prisoners have already been executed. These were not drug lords or armed criminals. They were desperate people, manipulated and used by dangerous networks, and now many face the ultimate punishment, hunting with no international trial, no public defense, and no global outrage. This story is not only a tragedy, it's a call for justice, for the innocent lives caught between borders, between nations, and between the cracks of human dignity. They left with nothing but a name, a dream, a mother's prayer stitched into the lining of a torn shirt. From the highlands of Ethiopia to the scorched trails of Yemen, they walked barefoot, over stones, through gunfire, under the weight of hunger and hope. But hope is a dangerous thing on this road, on the border of Saudi Arabia, where the sand meets steel and silence. They met the gates of hell, not guarded by devils, but by men with guns. Run, they were told, and when they did, the sky erupted. Bullets rained, limbs flew, screams vanished in the wind. These were not criminals, they were survivors, trapped between smugglers and soldiers, forced to carry death to escape their own. And now, reports say they are being sentenced to die. 49 names erased before the world even learned to say them. Some have already been executed, quietly, without trial, without mercy. This is not law, this is not justice. This is slaughter. The desert knows, the wind remembers, and so must we. These were not mules. They were people, dreamers who died with their eyes still open. Every year, thousands of Ethiopian men and women leave their homeland, driven by poverty, conflict, and the hope for a better future. Their destination, Saudi Arabia. Their path, a deadly corridor through war-torn Yemen. Many never make it. Along this treacherous route, they fall into the hands of smugglers, criminal networks that extort, abuse, and in some cases, force them to carry drugs across the border. They are not traffickers, they are victims, held hostage by desperation and manipulated by greed. But the real nightmare begins at the border. Human rights organizations have uncovered horrifying accounts. Hundreds of migrants, including women and children, have been gunned down by Saudi border guards. Some were shelled by mortars, others had limbs blown off. Witnesses describe bodies piled in ravines. The guards, some say, didn't ask questions, they just opened fire. Those who survived faced detention, torture, and deportation, and now unconfirmed. Reports suggest a darker chapter, that some migrants may have been executed after being forced to carry drugs. If true, this is not justice, it is a tragedy. The Saudi government denies the accusations, but the bones in the mountains, the silent graves, and the wounded testimonies tell another story. These migrants are not just statistics, they are sons, daughters, dreamers, and their voices, though buried under fear and silence, must be heard. Great. Let's go deep. Here's an in-depth breakdown of the key global political stories from May 25-26, 2025, focusing on causes, implications, and global context. 1. Trump delays. 50%. EU tariffs. What happened? President Donald Trump extended the deadline for new 50% tariffs on EU imports after a call with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The new deadline is July 9. Why it matters. Trump's move is part of a larger push for reciprocal trade, targeting what he views as unfair EU trade practices. The EU is a major trading partner, and these tariffs would disrupt industries, including automobiles, agriculture, and tech. The delay signals an attempt to buy time for a deal, but also keeps the pressure high. Implications. If tariffs are imposed, a US-EU trade war could erupt, could impact global supply chains, especially in manufacturing and logistics, may affect the Eurozone economy, already facing inflation and slow growth. 2. Trump condemns. Putin clashes with Zelensky. What happened? In a Memorial Day speech, Trump warned Russia that attempting to conquer Ukraine would be its downfall. He also criticized Ukraine's president for publicly challenging US silence. Why it matters. Trump is walking a fine line, tough on Russia, but also critical of Ukraine's leadership. A shift from full-throated Western support signals a possible repositioning of US policy toward the war. Implications may cause uncertainty among NATO allies, unsure where US policy is heading. Could weaken Ukraine's diplomatic leverage if American support becomes conditional. Raises concerns about a more isolationist or transactional US foreign policy if Trump returns to full power. 3. Australia threatens to reclaim. Port of Darwin. What happened? Prime Minister Anthony Albanese gave an ultimatum to the company leasing the Port of Darwin. Sell it, or the government will forcibly reclaim it. Why it matters. The port is leased to a Chinese company, Landbridge Group. The move reflects rising concerns over Chinese strategic influence in Australia's critical infrastructure. Implications. Part of the broader Indo-Pacific power struggle between the West and China may trigger diplomatic backlash from Beijing, signals Australia's intention to tighten control over strategic assets and align more closely with US security goals. 4. King Charles III visits Canada. What happened? The British monarch and Queen Camilla began a royal tour of Canada on May 26, meeting Indigenous leaders, government officials, and the public. Why it matters comes during growing debate in Canada over republicanism versus monarchy, a chance for the king to build goodwill, especially with Indigenous communities. Implications could impact public opinion on Canada's future ties to the monarchy. Strengthens the king's image as a modernizing figure sensitive to colonial history. 5. Who sets new air pollution targets? What happened? At the 78th World Health Assembly, member states adopted new voluntary targets to combat air pollution, now one of the leading causes of preventable death. Why it matters. Over 7 million deaths annually are linked to poor air quality. The agreement reflects growing global urgency on environmental health. Implications. Could pressure countries like India and China, where pollution levels remain high, may influence urban policy, transportation, and energy planning worldwide. Part of a broader shift toward health-focused climate policy,